West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
The move by the RNC to censure Cheney and Kinzinger came shortly after former Vice President Mike Pence openly rebuked Donald Trump. This is what we're talking about while speaking to a group of conservative lawyers. So here is the former vice president pushing back at Trump's claim that Pence could have overturned the 2020 election.
This week, that President Trump said I had the right to overturn the election. President Trump is wrong. I had no right to overturn the election. The presidency belongs to the American people and the American people alone. And frankly, there is no idea more un-American than the notion that any one person could choose the American president. The truth is, there's more at stake than our party or political fortunes. Men and women, if we lose faith in the Constitution, we won't just lose elections. We'll lose our country.
I actually think that's a very significant thing. Tom and I differ on that point because I think that's quite significant. And so does the Wall Street Journal editorial page. In a piece entitled Mike Pence's Constitution, the Wall Street Journal editorial page writes this. Mr. Pence stands out as a rare Republican these days, willing to stand up to Mr. Trump's disgraceful behavior after the election. Too many in the GOP seem to have lost their constitutional moorings in thrall of one man. The conventional wisdom now is that Mr. Trump controls the Republican Party and can have 2024's nomination if he wants it. But someone should remind voters that Mr. Trump ended a three-time election loser. He mobilized Democrats against him in his historic numbers to cost the House, the GOP the House in 2018, then the White House in 2020, and finally the 2 Georgia Senate seats in 2021. Mr. Trump had significant policy successes, but Mr. Pence has received too little credit for his policy and personal advice. His conservative network and instincts helped to avoid more than one Trumpian self-implosion. He was loyal to Trump, and the president repaid him by pressuring him publicly and privately to commit an unconstitutional act. And we will we'll end it there. So it is very interesting if you look, Jonathan Lemire, at the arc of Mike Pence's service. Here's a guy who actually, before he was selected as Donald Trump's vice president, was very critical of him in private conversations. Then he became a loyalist, even moving water in the same direction where Mr. Trump would move water at meetings. But last week, actually, to me at least, that was quite a break, quite a difference from how he and the rest of the party have been acting. And it wasn't lost on me, or I'm sure you, that he did it at the Federalist Society.
No, it was not. Federalist Society, of course, one of the groups responsible for some of what Republicans would say were Donald Trump's greatest triumphs, naming 3 conservative Supreme Court justices to the bench while in office. And you're right to trace the arc of Pence's career, where, first of all, he was likely going to lose his reelection candidacy for Republican governor of Indiana when Trump picked him to be his VP to shore up his support with more traditional conservatives and evangelicals. And then Pence became the loyalist with the dear leader-esque cabinet meetings that he really started praising the president. But there's, of course, been a falling out over January 6th. After Election Day, when it became clear that January 6th was the former president and his team's best efforts to prevent Joe Biden from being elected and taking office, a lot of that plan hinged on Pence, who had been so loyal. They thought he would be again and follow through with what Donald Trump wanted. Pence did not, of course, and his own life was put in jeopardy that day, he and his family. We remember the hang Mike Pence chants that went up from the crowd. And Pence is now trying to have a delicate balancing act where he has been firm that, hey, I did the right thing on January 6th, he's saying. I did my constitutional duty. I had no other choice. At the same time, Pence clearly wants to run for president himself in 2024. We'll see if he does, if Trump follows through with his own bid. But right now, he is trying to continue to say he did the right thing, but at the same time, not anger Trump or Trump loyalists too much while doing so. And I think that's what we heard from a lot of other Republicans as well this week. And in the wake of those remarks and in the wake of the legitimate political discourse conversation, where they can say, hey, Pence, we support what Mike Pence did on January 6th, but we still think Donald Trump is the overwhelming favorite in 2024, and he would have our support were he the Republican nominee.
Yeah. So, Tom, let me ask you. I'm curious. You look at a lot of data points. We've been talking about the fact that, now only 60% of Republicans are saying they want Donald Trump to run for re-election. 40% say they don't. I quoted the AP poll that said the majority of Republicans consider themselves Republicans first. Only like 35% consider themselves to be Trump supporters first over being party members. That's a pretty dramatic swing. You look at the fact that Republicans, for some reason, and I say some reason, actually I know why, they're seeing things in the polls. Republicans, even Josh Hawley, are starting to come out criticizing the violence that happened on January the 6th. I'm curious, why do you think we are seeing some movement in the direction of normalcy? I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to normalize Donald Trump. I'm not trying to normalize my former party. I'm just curious, do you see any trend lines moving away from the complete lunacy of the Trump years in the Republican Party?
Well, I think you see cross currents. Certainly, a lot of these folks are looking at polls and of the kind you just pointed out and saying, there's room now to say I don't have to be part of the cult because, as you pointed out, there are people saying I'm a Republican first, I'm a Trumper second. But I also think that there are currents in the other direction. I mean, we're talking about this, as Mika just pointed out, in the shadow of the censure of the last 2 independent Republicans in Congress. That we're talking about this while other Republicans have had to push back against the Republican National Committee trying to whitewash January 6th. The Wall Street Journal's language was interesting. They said that, good for Mike Pence for saying the president pressured him to commit an unconstitutional act. Doesn't that tell us how far and how low the standards in the party have dropped that over a year later, Mike Pence is kind of getting a golf clap for saying, yes, the president asked me to do something I shouldn't have done, when in an earlier, I think, better time, Republicans would have said, we have to do something about the fact that the de facto leader of the party just is an enemy of the Constitution. And so, I'm happy to say 2 cheers for Mike Pence, but maybe just 1.5 or 2. But I still think that this isn't, this is too late and at least a bit too little. Yeah,
and Mika, of course, I think it's shocking, even coming from Donald Trump's RNC, and he still owns this RNC.
I know.
The language that January the 6th was, quote, legitimate political discourse is about to say that violence, that sort of violence was legitimate political discourse, actually, unfortunately, fits very tightly into the definition of fascism in any country.
Well,
in this country or any other country.
It is Monday, the 7th of February of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays, because it's Monday. Comes right after a weekend. That's right, and whatever happens to be left over, we repurpose it into a lovely gourmet delight for your gourmet Epicurean pleasure. Well, how are you? We made it through the weekend. Let's hope we did, as far as we know, because I kind of think that time and consciousness are fungible. Maybe we can put it on a market. Maybe. That's another discussion for another day, because it just seems so cryptic. Crypto does. I keep telling people the reason that we, read more articles or come across more articles about people getting just insanely rich off of crypto, because no one wants to hear about people who lost their life savings in a pyramid scheme. No one. It's sad. We want to hear about the people who were able to abscond with the money. Okay, raising mobsters. Now, that's entirely different than what crypto is, but I'm just saying, raising mobsters to the level of heroes, and then, people who just happenstance upon riches beyond compare because of somehow gaming the system, while at the same time draining the earth of its resources. Okay, well, we made them heroes when actually I think that they're aliens from outer space sucking us dry. Whenever I hear about crypto farms, mining farms being, erected wherever, I in my mind, I see those grasshopper-like oil pumps going up and down, sucking every last bit out. Every last drop. Until there ain't no more. And when there ain't no more, well, we'll put some steam down there to liquefy all the hard deposits on the walls of the formation. And we'll suck that out too. Suck until there's none left. And then we'll put it under pressure and fracture all those rocks so we can get microscopic bubbles of gas and oil. And then we'll pump that out too. Okay, that's what I see in my mind's eye whenever anybody talks about a crypto mining farm being erected wherever. Keep that in mind, okay? And it's also a pyramid scheme. Whoever is holding the bag last loses. Remember that. Oh, the Ponzi's will get away with it for a while. Okay. Some of them, pass away while they're in stir, like Bernie Madoff. Don't get your Bernies confused here now. All right. Well, how many times did we hear the chants at Trump rallies of lock her up? Lock her up. Lock her up. And that was directed at Hillary Clinton because of some evil that she's done that is is equivalent to whatever Trump has done. So they both should suffer, is what I've heard. I'm a little confused by that because I'm still trying to figure out what evil did Hillary Clinton do other than what people were brainwashed into believing she had done. Just as a little history now about the Clintons. They were being attacked when they were still in the governor's office. Okay? Because the old boy network sure didn't want some brat from a broken home raising himself to the level of President of the United States. He was a hippie. The Clintons were hippies, and they took over the governor mansion. So forces were arrayed against them from the very beginning. McDougal's. Yeah, remember those people? Well, everybody gets caught up in the backwash of it, don't they? And they're made to suffer. It's very important to remember that the Conways, yes, those Conways had something to do with it too. After Bill Clinton announced he was running for president of the United States and then became president, and then it went into overdrive. So all this BS, as soon as Hillary Clinton became first lady, you would not believe the outrage that was expressed by bros in Orange County. It's like they had some sort of, I don't know, it was like a trigger. Yeah, a trigger. I don't know where they got it. Maybe they got it at their secret Mason meetings at the Masonic Hall. I don't know. But more than one said the same idiotic talking point about Hillary, and I just thought it was just general misogyny. But boy, did that play into, I don't know, a certain reptilian part of a certain segment of our society's brain. I could not understand how much hate could be directed towards, I don't know, the First Lady. I didn't live during FDR's time. I have heard that the hate and vitriol directed towards Eleanor was rather extreme. So what I thought at the time was, wow, they're going after Hillary like they went after Eleanor. I think I'm right. So Hillary Clinton was threatened with death, well, incarceration and death at every Trump rally that Trump had and has. Lock her up. And what was the great crime that she supposedly did to lock her up? Well, other than, running a secret sex ring cabal in the basement of Comet Pizza. And now I guess they're out at the Butterfly Sanctuary in Texas along the Rio Grande. Other than that. No, it wasn't stealing Podesta's risotto recipe. That came later. Lock her up is because she called emails that were on a personal server her personal correspondence. And for that, they wanted to lock her up. So what did Trump do for 4 years? Wow, man. The Oval Office in Mar-a-Lago were the shred sheds. Uh-huh. Here, let me tear that up. Now, we had read, and we had reported this during, the time, either on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy or in the previous iteration of what we once were. Yes. Anyway, we had reported on this behavior of tearing up paper when he was just, running his family business, that people would give him any kind of correspondence or a contract or something, and he'd tear it up. His lawyers knew that they didn't want to give him the original copies. Original copies? Well, the original text. Give him a copy. Because he'd tear it up. He was told, he was briefed on the Presidential Records Act, and he knew, and he didn't care because the law doesn't apply to him. He makes up the law. He is the law. So he tore up for 4 years official documents. No claim that they're personal, though I wouldn't put it past them. After all, they called him his generals. His black guy. God. His whatever. Whatever arm or apparatus in the government was his. 4 years, shredding official documents in violation of the Presidential Records Act. From last I heard, I think that's a felony. I think. Maybe it's because it was never applied to the president, because no one ever thought the president would do shit like that. Excuse my French in the morning. Mad. Okay? If it's going to be French. Lock her up. Because of emails between her and Bill of a personal nature. Between Hillary and Chelsea of a personal nature. Trump tearing up documents of secret love letters between he and Kim Jong-un. I don't know why it would be Putin. I'd like to see that correspondence. I don't know why it would be Putin that would try to overthrow the United States of our government. He told me that he wasn't doing it, and I believe him. Yeah, well, you're in office, and that's proof right there that Putin was manipulating our electoral process. How else would a mobster like that guy get elected? By the slimmest of margins, by the way, after losing the popular vote by enormous numbers. So we have that going on for us, and what's going to be done about it? Huh? I mean, we got fake electors handing in forged documents as if they're official, with official seals, by the way, in some instances. People didn't just come up with that. That's an ALEC operation. Here, let's have an insurgency in a box. Fill in the blanks. Go to work. You don't need to know how to actually run an insurgency. We have it all planned out for you. Here, step by step. Fill in the blanks. Grassroots my ass. Even up these protests up in Canada and Ottawa, and we'll get into that at the chef's table later on. Grassroots. They're all AstroTurf as usual. And there's actually an international row between Canada and some certain GOP politicians here in the United States. Well, like I said, we'll get into that a little bit later. But this tilt to the right, and I don't think it's a tilt necessarily, this push. We haven't actually been tilted yet. We're being pushed. Pushed and pulled to the right. Has a certain, well, bear with me now. This might seem like a contradiction. It might seem, like an oxymoron. But it is an amorphous conspiracy. It's in many ways how our guys were able to fight in World War II without having a whole lot of direct command telling them what to do. They made decisions in the field. But that's because they were trained and they were a pace of the general strategy, and they stuck to it, did what needed to be done for the prime directive. And I don't know, maybe there's some sort of enigma machine that, tells them when to say the exact same talking points every single time for decades. I don't know. Seems like one party was susceptible to brainwashing, and look at them, 70-some million. That's a lot to consider, and why don't we get into the curated part of the show, since I've alluded to some of it already. It's pulling me. Yes, well, of course, at the top, Mike Pence thought he had a clear road to the presidency. Now he is in a delicate balancing act, because they want to hang him. And they weren't kidding. On the rest of the menu, Delta Airlines wants the DOJ to put unruly passengers on the national no-fly list, and they should. Trump's tirade that black DAs are racist echoes other racist tropes, a lot of them too. And as women's health clinics are closing across the country, millions in tax dollars are flowing to anti-abortion centers instead. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where far-right candidates in France fight for the limelight. And Ottawa declared a state of emergency over the anti-science COVID-19 protests and warned US GOP politicians to cease meddling in Canada's domestic affairs. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and thank you, Kelly, for doing so. She's quite busy these days, so thank you for doing all that you do. If you would then take a look across from that chat room link to the left, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, right over there is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could afford, how about an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance, and if you could afford to send those funds to us once a month, we are able to pool those dollars with what we pull out of our own wallets and continue this powerhouse of resistance against dark forces arrayed against the United States of America and, dare I say, democracy itself. And your generosity over all these many years, going on 11, in about a month and a half, we'll be celebrating our 11th anniversary, almost a dozen. And so, because of your generosity, we've been able to keep this little powerhouse of resistance resisting as the founders originally intended so many years ago. All kidding aside, thank you for your generosity, and thank you for considering, some generous givings in the future, okay, because we need it. Prices keep going up, and the shelves are bare? I don't know. There's a lot to buy out there. It's just they force it on you, and it's pretty damn expensive. Yeah, here, upgrade this. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you anyway for your generosity, and it is taken quite seriously here, really, truly. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple. You just go to @NetrootsRadio. Tom takes care of that because he made it simple. Thank you, Tom. He's a quite busy fellow, too, and thank you for everything that you're doing around here as well, because we need the help. Yes, we do. If you would like to follow me on Twitter, and I suggest that you do that at Justice Putnam. Now, I post the show notes and links diary. That's why I suggest that you follow me. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime, and then I get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms, and you know who they are. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. And, of course, the Deep Archive can be found at the Internet Archive, archive.org, Netroots Radio. Look us up. Links are provided, and we will update the... we're due for an update on our homepage anyway, so we'll get that linked up on the homepage, and it's all there, so there you go. All right, let's look at this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays, and it is out of the Associated Press by Anne D'Innocencio. Any person convicted of a disruption on board a flight should be added to the national no-fly list, Delta Airlines told the U.S. Department of Justice. In a letter to the Justice Department, Attorney General Merrick Garland, dated last Thursday, Delta CEO Ed Bastian said there should be zero tolerance for any behavior that affects flight safety. Bastian noted that while such incidents of bad behavior represent a small fraction of overall flights on Delta, the rate of incidents on the airline has increased nearly 100% since 2019. This action will help prevent future incidents and serve as a strong symbol of the consequences of not complying with crew member instructions on commercial aircraft, Bastian wrote in a letter furnished to the Associated Press by Delta Airlines. Wow, I think they're corporate commies. Maybe Marjorie and Lauren should find out if they're really corporate commies. Delta has, along with its industry partner, Airlines for America, been pushing since last year for heightened reporting, investigation, and prosecution of those who interfere with onboard safety. The airlines, based in Atlanta, said it has put nearly 1,900 people on Delta's no-fly list for refusing to comply with masking requirements and submitted more than 900 banned names to the TSA to pursue civil penalties. A spokesperson with the TSA, which enforces the FBI no-fly list of potential terrorist threats, referred a reporter to the FBI since that agency maintains the database. Both the FBI and the Justice Department declined to comment. January 23rd, according to its website. And in December, the TSA announced a new partnership with the FAA that would call for the FAA will share information of passengers facing fines for unruly behavior with the TSA, which may remove the passenger from its pre-check screening eligibility, a privilege reserved for low-risk travelers. Bobby Kana Calvin of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Monday. Them on malicious prosecutors. These prosecutors are vicious, horrible people. They're racist and they're very sick. They're mentally sick, Trump said before warning his audience. In reality, they're not after me. They're after you. Oh, really? Like when you're asleep. He repeated his charge of racism, but skipped over an obvious detail. Those prosecutors are black. His diatribe left the clear impression when he found out that one judge in Kansas was of Latin American descent. He didn't think he could be fair in his assessment of him either because, well, you know, he's one of those people. The comments carry the echoes of racist messages that have proliferated in recent years, that black people and other minorities are taking power, and that they will exact revenge on white people, or at the very least, treat white people as they have been treated. Well, if you don't want that, then don't treat people like that. If you don't want to be treated how you've been treating people, don't treat people the way you've been. For instance, after all that they went through, who were the most loyal? Huh? Now, come on. Yeah, I don't think that you see very many Tuskegee airmen or their progeny tearing down the Capitol and peeing and smearing feces on the walls. Nope. You don't see any of them putting their feet up on the desk. No, you don't see that. The only people that would exact revenge, yeah, the hooded kind. Those are the kind of people. Now, Trump attacking prosecutors is nothing new. When his business and political dealings are investigated, he often strikes back with accusations of misconduct and witch hunts. He has long been accused of bigotry. Before the 2016 election, Trump called U.S. District Judge Gonzalo Curiel, that's the judge I was speaking about, a hater who could not be fair to him in a fraud case involving Trump University because of the judge's Hispanic heritage and because Trump vowed to build a wall between the U.S. and Mexico. And after the 2017 torch, stormtroopers chanting, Jews will not replace us, and the very fine people in the synagogue cowering in fear for their lives. So there were two very fine people. He had never accused his prosecutors of racism before, but then until the start of this year, one of his attorneys was Cyrus Vance Jr., who is white, or one of those attorneys. Now he faces an array of black prosecutors: New York Attorney General Letitia James, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, Vance's successor and the first black person to hold that office, Fannie Willis, the Fulton County, Georgia DA, even Representative Benny Thompson, the leader of the congressional investigation into the January 6th insurrection. All these black people coming after him. And they're going to kill him in his sleep, but they're not coming after just him. They're coming after you, too. Treatments. And now Trump is using the investigations against him and the prosecutors behind them as evidence of a larger systemic pattern that white people don't have a place in the future of America, and he's the only one that can fight on their behalf. There is evidence that Trump's words have had consequences. Willis, the Georgia prosecutor, who asked a judge to impanel a special grand jury to help probe criminal disruptions by Trump and his allies during the 2020 presidential election and its aftermath, told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that threats and racist slurs against her have increased since Trump's rally in Texas. In a letter to the FBI, Willis called Trump's rhetoric alarming. She called on the FBI to help assess security at the county courthouse and provide personnel to protect the area against possible attack like the one on the U.S. Capitol a year ago. Trump has his defenders. Harrison Fields, who worked in the Trump White House, now serves as a spokesperson for U.S. Representative Byron Donalds of Florida, a Trump ally, and one of only two black Republicans serving in the House. He said the country has more important matters to tackle. Oh, another one of Trump's black guys. He likes to have them. He owns them, The flip side of Trump's aspersions of black prosecutorial power is the argument that it has been too long in coming. The country's system of law and order has long subjugated African Americans from slavery through the days of Jim Crow until today, some would argue, as some states adopt anti-protest laws and tighter control over the ballot box. Black inmates still disproportionately occupy jail and prison cells. And a 2019 study by the Reflective Democracy Campaign found that only 5% of the country's elected prosecutors were of color. But black men and women now lead some of the country's largest prosecutorial offices, including those in New York, Chicago, Dallas, and Detroit. Which beggars the question, why would Trump go after those cities and those prosecutors? Anti-abortion centers across the country are receiving tens of millions of tax dollars to talk women out of ending the pregnancies, a nearly five-fold increase from a decade ago that resulted from an often overlooked effort by mostly Republican-led states. The nonprofits known as crisis pregnancy centers are typically religiously affiliated and counsel clients against having an abortion as part of their free but limited services. That practice, and the fact that they generally are not licensed as medical facilities, have raised questions about whether it's appropriate to funnel so much tax money their way. An Associated Press tally based on state budget figures reveals that nearly $89 million has been allocated to such centers across about a dozen states this fiscal year alone. A decade ago, the annual funding for the programs hovered around $17 million in about 8 states. Estimates of how many abortions have been prevented by such programs are unknown because many states only require reports of how many clients were served. Similarly, as abortion rates have declined across the U.S. for years, there is no way to know the extent to which pregnancy centers have played a role. Trying to pinpoint exactly how many pregnancy centers receive taxpayer dollars also is difficult because each state has a different system to distribute the money. Well, I think we better clean that up, don't you think? All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, The City Mouse. Documentaries used to feel like cinema's poor country mouse. I mean, there were features, and then there were the small underfunded films about the plight of Appalachian miners, or the New York sewer system, or rangers in America's national forests, which were clearly someone's passion project, and were interesting once you got yourself to get into them. But these days, in the wake of reality TV, in the world of Netflix, and especially with the success of series like Cheer, Jeffrey Epstein, Filthy Rich, and Tiger King, documentaries can be salacious, sensationalist, must-have coffee break conversation. In 2019, the Norwegian online tabloid Verdens Gang, or just VG, published a story about an Israeli con artist who hunted successful women on Tinder, convinced them that he was a successful millionaire diamond merchant, gained their trust, friendship, and even love, and then drained them of all of their money and more. VG called him Der Tinder-Swindler. Netflix must have jumped on this story because just a couple of years later we have their latest feature documentary, The Tinder Swindler, directed by Felicity Morris in her directorial debut. No narrator, the spine of the doc is 4 interviews, 3 with women who were conned and 1 with reporters from VG, and it is so slickly packaged. You spend the whole first half of the movie hearing from 2 of the swipeable, likable women, talking about the jet trips and luxury hotels and 4-star restaurants at the con's start, and since all these relationships took place through social media, Morris has actual texts, pictures, and even video to sprinkle into the narrative. It's a retailer's dream. Plus, there's all of this B-roll. They get one of their subjects to reenact heading out to her first date, and Jessica Jones's music runs from upbeat to fraught as the con sets in. It's almost too much. The Tinder Swindler feels ready to titillate more than educate. Fortunately, the core story is real enough and moving enough to pair plenty of cheese with the caviar. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Suddenly, social distancing is our new national etiquette, abruptly supplanting handshakes, hugs, gatherings, and other forms of ingrained communal behavior by us humans. Awkward, disconcerting, isolating. Yet, as we frantically scramble to deter the health and economic ravages of COVID-19, we might benefit by pondering a self-inflicted cause of the contagion's disastrous spread: social distancing. For some 40 years, American corporations and governments have imposed economic, political, and social policies to distance the financial fortunes of the wealthy few from the well-being of the workaday majority. Consider the interrelationship of multimillionaires with the unseen kitchen staff of restaurants where they dine. To further enrich themselves, such multimillionaires have forced low-wage policies on food preparers, denied health coverage for them, and lobbied to kill proposals to provide paid sick leave. So, a kitchen worker coughs because he or she is infected with coronavirus, but doesn't know it, since the worker has no health care coverage for testing. Even though running a fever, the staffer must come to work or lose the job. A few days later, a multimillionaire sneezes because, well, COVID-19 doesn't distinguish between rich and poor. The very proposals that plutocrats have been blocking for years, like living wages, Medicare for all, home health care, and others, are exactly what a sane government would adopt to avoid the consequences of inequality that now confronts every American. This is Jim Hightower saying the actual disease that's forcing social distancing on our country is the widening separation of rich elites from the rest of us, and the cure is a national push for renewed social cohesiveness. The catastrophic spread of COVID-19 reveals a truth we too often deny. We are a species of completely interdependent beings.
If you'd like more of Jim Hightower's real populism, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter gives you the real lowdown on which corporations, by name, are doing what to the middle class, our environment, and our democracy. Each month, the Hightower Lowdown brings you facts you didn't know, along with actions you can take to fight back. It also comes with a sense of humor. Hightower believes we can fight the gods and still have fun. Plus, get this, it's cheap. Only $15 brings you 12 issues a year. For real populism, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1913. Law enforcement officers and mining company guards rode on an armored train, firing indiscriminately into a tent colony of striking miners and their families at Holly Grove, West Virginia. For nearly a year, what became known as the Paint Creek, Cabin Creek mine wars had raged in the rich coal range of West Virginia. The miners wanted union recognition and the representation of the United Mine Workers of America. The mine owners refused. The mine bosses evicted more than 35,000 miners and their families from company housing in towns, leaving the evicted miners homeless and living in tent communities. As tensions grew, shootouts between the owners' private security forces and the striking miners were frequent, resulting in 20 deaths. More than 200 miners and unionists were arrested and jailed. One of those unionists arrested was 86-year-old labor leader Mother Jones. On this day, the miners had raided a company store. In retaliation, the county sheriff, his deputies, and mine guards boarded a train, specially reinforced with armor and mounted with a machine gun. The train was commissioned by the state's so-called Progressive Party, the Bull Moose Party of Teddy Roosevelt. Nicknamed the Bull Moose Special, the armored train approached Holly Grove. It gave 2 blasts of its whistles, then the machine guns let loose on the tents of sleeping miners and their families. One man was killed trying to get his pregnant wife to safety. Another striker, Sesko Eastep, was killed as more than 100 machine gun bullets blazed through the frame of his house. The assault left several more injured. The bloody mine wars in West Virginia eventually caused an inquiry by the U.S. Congress, the first such congressional inquiry into the actions of a state government.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. River City Hash Mondays. We always begin, weather from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 27 degrees Fahrenheit. Under foggy conditions, will be partly cloudy this afternoon with highs in the low 60s, winds light and variable, mostly clear tonight with lows in the mid to low 50s, and mostly sunny skies tomorrow with highs near 63. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County stand at 394,018 with 439 confirmed deceased. Pollen is rated as none outside the window on Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 22 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at level 2. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.45 inches. Visibility is down to 1.5 miles, and relative humidity is at 91%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 50 degrees and cloudy. Rome is 50 degrees and fair. Paris is 50 degrees and fair. Rome is 58 and partly cloudy with a bit of wind. Kyiv is 35 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 26 and fair. Hong Kong is 60 degrees and cloudy. Tokyo is 40 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 64 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 46 with heavy fog. And New York is 35 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Staff at Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. France's dueling far-right presidential candidates held back-to-back campaign rallies on Saturday, trying to steal each other's thunder and keep their nationalist, anti-immigration agenda front and center in the race for April's presidential election. Marine Le Pen, who came in second in the 2017 presidential election, was holding her first major campaign event in the city of Reims in Champagne country. She presented her platform to thousands of supporters and tried to reinvigorate her base after some high-profile defections to the campaign of rival Eric Zemmour. Zemmour, a pundit and provocateur who has been repeatedly convicted of hate speech, held a rally in the northern city of Lille on the same day, apparently trying to draw attention away from Le Pen. Some protesters outside the rally skirmished with police. Both candidates are hoping to unseat Emmanuel Macron in the election on April 10th, which also has a presidential runoff between the top two contenders on April 24th. Macron has a campaign team in place, but has yet to officially declare his candidacy. A centrist, he has shifted to the right amid growing support for conservative and far-right policies, notably on security and immigration.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout. c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Rob Gillies of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The mayor of Canada's capital declared a state of emergency yesterday, Sunday, and a former U.S. ambassador to Canada said groups in the U.S. must stop interfering in the domestic affairs of America's neighbor as protesters opposed to COVID-19 restrictions continued to paralyze Ottawa's downtown. Mayor Jim Watson said the declaration highlights the need for support from other jurisdictions and levels of government. It gives the city some additional powers around procurement and how it delivers services which could help purchase equipment required by frontline workers and first responders. Thousands of protesters descended in Ottawa again on the weekend, joining 100 who remained since last weekend. Residents of Ottawa are furious at the nonstop blaring of horns, traffic disruption, and harassment and fear with no end in sight after the police chief called it a siege that he could not manage. The Freedom Truck Convoy has attracted support from U.S. Republicans, including Trump, who called Prime Minister Justin Trudeau a far-left lunatic who has destroyed Canada with insane COVID mandates. Canada-U.S. relations used to be mainly about solving technical issues. Today, Canada is unfortunately experiencing a radical U.S. politicians involving themselves in Canadian domestic issues. Trump and his followers are a threat not just to the U.S., but to all democracies. Bruce Hyman, a former U.S. ambassador under President Barack Obama, stated. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Terrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Ba-da-da-dum-dee-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-dee-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.